Disclaimer: these videos are not made for a younger audience. They may contain coarse language as well as discussions of mature themes and situations, and thus may be deemed unsuitable for a younger audience. Viewer discretion is advised. What does the world's greatest hero do when he knows his days are numbered? In the early 2000s, DC had the idea to create a line of comics made to be something timeless, unencumbered by any pre-existing canon. Something any audience, new or old, could just pick up and read.
We had a very simple idea when we set up the All-Star Comics. All-Star Comics had one very basic principle. It was all-star characters and all-star creators. We wanted to really prop up and bring the best of the best together, and not just attract the readers who are constantly reading our books or out there buying our books on a regular basis, but attract the casual reader, people who are aware of who Superman was, and bring them all together at this one spot so that even if they had never read another Superman comic before, they'd feel comfortable with this and enjoy the whole experience.
I'm not sure what sparked the idea. I couldn't exactly find any quotes stating any particular reasoning for it. One can presume it was influenced in part by their cinematic releases and planned future films, a way to grab any moviegoers who might be interested in picking up a book or two. This is, again, just me speculating based in part on Marvel doing something similar at the same time. And also to this day.
I'm literally grasping at straws!
So they announced All-Star, a line that would pair DC's top talent with its most beloved of characters. Announcing All-Star Superman, written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Frank Quitely, and All-Star Batman, written by Frank Miller and drawn by Jim Lee, as well as All-Star Wonder Woman, to be written and drawn by Adam Hughes, All-Star Green Lantern by Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chiang, and All-Star Batgirl by Jeff Johns. You didn't think of him Green Lantern. And J.G. Jones. And while All-Star Superman became an instant classic, your doctor really did get held up, Reagan. It's never as bad as it seems. You're much stronger than you think you are. Trust me. All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, as it was called at release, was... Who the hell do you think you are anyway, giving out orders like this?
What are you, dense? Are you or something? Who the hell do you think I am? I'm the goddamn Batman.
Reviled upon release, never actually finished, and killed the All-Star Comics line. There were the later All-Star Western and All-Star Batman, but those were unrelated to this initiative and are actually in the main continuity. But while Asbar failed, survived only by memes, All-Star Superman was beloved by fans and was adapted into the film we'll be taking a look at today, which was released in 2011 as part of DC's direct-to-video line that persists to this day, at least at time of recording. So let's not waste any time. I'm going to jump right into this thing, talk a bit about where the movie diverges from the comic, and we'll see just how good this adaptation really is. Off the bat, the art direction is spectacular. They did a truly commendable job translating Frank Quitely's singular art style into something that can be animated. It's pretty smooth, the characters have translated pretty well. The only things I really have to note is that, for simplicity, Dr. Quintum's coat has been made pink instead of the full rainbow, and they made Superman look kinda like Taylor Lautner. Issue 1 gets adapted pretty straight. Comic book mega scientist Leo Quintum has set out to get a spoonful of the sun, as you do. And as things have started going sideways, Lex Luthor activates his plan to full-on make things go tits up. Luthor tampered with one of Quintum's Gelf to turn it into a living bomb he's controlling from a remote location. But before he can send everyone to Kingdom Come, the protagonist of this story and that one has come to save the day. Over at the planet, we're given the cover story for Lex's mad scheme. He's made it seem as though he's going to profit from a water shortage he's planning to create through tampering with the sun, which Superman has learned through investigating as Clark Kent. And yet Batman's the one who gets all the credit as a detective. But this isn't Lex's true plan, or at least, it's not his main one. When the Gelb was shot out of the ship into the sun,
You let him go in the sun?
he caused a solar flare, which bathed Superman in its radiation as he pulled Quintum's pod to safety, leading to Superman developing a new power, his existing power being multiplied exponentially, and Lex's desired effect, apoptosis, cell death. He used the source of Superman's powers to overcharge his cells and cause him to die, slowly, but surely, and inevitably.
I see it, like tiny fireworks beneath my skin.
Your cells are oversaturated with power. They are bursting from within.
I'm dying.
I'm sorry, Superman. If I hadn't tried to steal fire from the sun, none of this would have happened. It was his plan all along. Luthor used me to kill you.
Superman swears Quintum to secrecy, and as Luthor is placed under arrest, Clark starts off on putting his effects in order, starting with telling Lois the truth. The whole truth.
You're Clark Kent?
I'm Clark Kent.
Sorry, Superman, but you've got to admit, that's very hard to believe.
You know, I understand Lois's hesitance to believe him. She'd spent however much time trying to prove that they're one and the same, and presented time and again with evidence to the contrary.
How do you explain the time Clark was a witness in the Boss Grimaldi trial and you were his bodyguard?
Batman was standing in for me.
And when Clark presented you with the key to the city?
A robot.
Of course she wouldn't believe him if he had just outright told her. Anyway, Supes has brought her to the fortress for a reason. He wants to give her a quick tour and treat her to dinner on the Titanic before her birthday. Unfortunately, Lois gets sidetracked and takes a peek into Superman's secret lab, and becomes paranoid that he's going to do something horrible to her, leading her to grab the kryptonite gun from his armory as a defensive measure. Lucky for him, though, his little trip to the sun has made him immune to its effects. He reassures her that everything's alright, explaining the paranoia as being a side effect of some chemical inhalation. And since it's already been spoiled a bit, Superman decides it's best to just give her her present. All of his powers, none of his weaknesses, for 24 hours. What a lucky lady Lois Lane is. The movie moves Lex's trial from the start of issue 5 to roughly the beginning of issue 3, before cutting back to Superman and Lois, with their plans interrupted by an invasion of dinosaur men from the Earth's core. Isn't that just typical? Dino Men just have the worst fucking timing, I swear. We are also introduced to Samson and Atlas, time-traveling heroes based on characters from Greek and Jewish myth, who are fighting off the invaders. Samson throwing their leader into space, and while Superman goes to save him from dying in the vacuum, the time travelers hit on Lois to try and win her over. This continues when the four go down to the core to hand them over to the Dinosaur, best fucking name you could possibly give to a leader of dinosaur people, I swear, who tells Superman that this whole debacle was instigated by Samson, and, if you ask me, probably Atlas too. Those two clowns are showering Lois with promises of fantastic dates and giving her the radioactive crown jewels of the Ultra Sphinx. Though, for some reason, the movie gives some of Atlas's lines to Samson. This would mostly be a non-issue, just straight up nitpicking, but
If I win your heart, I'll make the Titans kneel before you and give testimony to your loveliness. But we meant no harm to Lois. I swear to living Zeus.
those lines specifically reference both Zeus and the Titans, which are figures of Greek legend. Samson is a figure of Judeo-Christian lore. I'm just saying, it's weird to give those lines to Samson and not Atlas when they're both in the movie and he's standing right there. Anyway, the Ultra Sphinx is here, and he's ultra pissed at the Mythmakers for stealing his shit, and so suspends Lois in a state of being neither alive nor dead until someone can answer his riddle.
Question. What happens when the irresistible force meets the immovable object?
They surrender.
Response acceptable.
Of course Superman could figure it out, but there's still Samson and Atlas to deal with. They made a deal that whoever had the best show of raw strength would win Lois's hand, with Samson defeating Krull and Atlas making quick work of his army. So, to get them to go away, Superman challenges them both to an arm wrestling match, in which he breaks theirs. This allows Superman and Lois to make good on the rest of their plans, partying in Atlantis, sharing a kiss on the moon, and spending her dwindling moments of power cozying up together on her balcony, with Superman then carrying her to bed once she drifts off. Sometime soon after, Clark is sent out by the Planet to interview Lex, who's requested him for an exclusive, and also taking the opportunity to save Lex from being electrocuted to death. For now. Lex then goes on to wax philosophical about his hatred of Superman as he exercises, saying that his mere existence diminishes any and all human achievement, using Clark as an example, claiming that, if not for the Man of Steel, maybe Lois would have been interested in Clark. This incredibly one-sided conversation, if you could even call it that, is continued while they walk past a few cells, including a very poorly thought-out one housing Parasite, who feeds on the energy emanating off of Superman without any leaded glass to separate them. All that power forces him to become huge and power-mad, easily breaking containment and chasing Clark and Lex through the prison out of whoever is unlucky enough to cross his path, and the kinetic energy from all the bolts being fired at him. After a massive cloud of tear gas is dispersed into the mess hall, Superman is able to save the guards, as well as Lex through Clark's bumbling persona. Likewise, he's able to subdue Parasite by faking an earthquake, followed by Lex ranting.
Attack me! You know what happens when you take on Lex Luthor? The same thing that's gonna happen to Superman!
After making it back to Lex's cell on death row, Luthor shows Clark out through his secret escape hatch, letting him know that he has no intentions to escape, and showing Clark his way out with his niece, Nostalthia, who the filmmakers decided to age down from the comic, 18 to 16. He does leave Clark with the story of the century, though, telling him of how he's killed Superman, unaware that the two are one and the same. He's not giving out the story just yet, but his time with Lex does spur him on to tell Lois that he's dying before he flies off into space with the bottled city of Kandor, setting off to free its still shrunken inhabitants on a distant world.
Why?
Do you know what this is?
It's the bottle city of Kandor. One of your enemies stole it from Krypton before it exploded.
I've been trying for years to restore the thousands of people who live there to regular size. But I have found a suitable planet for them to colonize, and I'm taking them there. Even under normal circumstances, it would take me 3 weeks to fly there and back. In my current condition, it'll take longer than that. Maybe longer than I have. It's what I've been keeping from you. I'm dying.
You won't die. You'll find a way out of this. We'll be together. Our children will go flying in Metropolis Park. Promise me.
We can't have children. Our biology is too different.
Boy, has that aged poorly. But then, maybe it's more like that Once Chip and Cedric comic. Anyway, this whole scene is another departure from the comic, with these being taken more or less from issue 10, with the context being altered to fit the new placement in the narrative. Among other things, Superman frees Kandor somewhere far away in the film instead of just over on Mars, to set up for his crash landing back on Earth in the next scene.
Look! Up in the sky!
Sorry if I startled you. It's been a long trip, and I'm feeling a bit under the weather.
Upon returning to Metropolis, he's greeted with the sight of mysterious architecture littered across the city, clinging to the now modified skyline. Returning to the Daily Planet is Clark, making the excuse that he was trapped under Rikers for the past 2 months. But before he can return to work, Lois grabs his attention, informing him that 2 more Kryptonians have arrived on Earth in his absence. He quickly flies out to meet with the pair, Barael and Lilo, but they're dismissive of the Man of Tomorrow. Even when he suggests a relation, dismissing Jor-El as worthless, and Kal as the same. But when he hears them talk about how superior they think they are compared to humanity, and sees how they've co-opted the fortress, he feels the need to stop them. However, he's in a weakened state, and it's 2 against 1, the pair kicking his ass and leaving a crack in the moon. Their reign won't last much longer, though. Barael and Lilo go to the planet sometime after the fight, demanding Clark drop his human facade. I can only do one air quote right now. Only the right arm has other options. Back on track. They demand Clark face them as Superman, but before he can show his face, Lilo feels faint and drops out of the sky. Superman catches her, and before too long, Barael falls sick too.
I can't fly! I'm so weak. Why do I feel so weak?
You said you retraced the path my ship took to get to Earth. That means you passed through Krypton's debris field. The minerals in your bodies have been slowly turning to kryptonite.
Superman can't reverse their condition, so at Barael's request, he sends them to the Phantom Zone, saving their lives. After receiving forgiveness for this by Barael, he is inspired to extend an olive branch to Lex Luthor, trying to inspire him to do the good he claimed he'd be able to do in a world without Superman, and Lex spits in his face. Typical. We're nearing the end now, and Superman's taking care of things in the fortress, cleaning the Sun Eater's pen, writing his last will and testament, and preparing for his last battle. Lex, however, is being put to death for his many, many crimes against humanity. It doesn't exactly stick, though. He's taken a serum to duplicate Superman's powers for the day, a serum which he had stolen and reverse-engineered from the Man of Tomorrow himself.
His fortress is less than entirely secure.
Rendezvous with his niece, Lex also prepares, building robots for Nostalgia to control and wreak havoc on Metropolis, and introducing his ally, Solaris. Back at the fortress, Superman emerges in a lead-lined suit to defend against the crimson rays of the tyrant's sun, and is joined by the fortress's Solitude's robots, with one staying behind for upkeep. Superman and his army go off to fight the Red Giant, many being destroyed off the bat, but he and a scant few are able to damage it, with the Sun Eater showing up to aid its former keeper, but is unfortunately killed by Solaris, infuriating Superman, who beats the tyrant into submission.
Mercy.
I don't think I have any left.
He just about makes it to the planet to deliver a story. His last story is Clark Kent, before falling over dead, with the rest of the planet's staff crowding around to see what's wrong. But that's not the end. Far from it when a newly empowered Lex Luthor is around and seeking revenge against the paper that routinely condemned him. Lex grandstands, boasting, denouncing the concept of justice, denying its existence outright, and destroying Jimmy's signal watch. But what good is unchecked ego in the face of humbling betrayal? Solaris has poisoned the sun, turning it blue in order to feed on it.
Don't you get it? Solaris double-crossed you and poisoned the sun, you vain, stupid little man!
Stupid.
Lois.
In the harm of Lois Lane, Superman finds the strength to hold on a little longer, blasting Lex with a gravity gun from the fortress.
Clark?
I told you, Lois. Superman.
Superman and Lex then fight through a section of Metropolis, particularly the subway system. But it's more of Superman taking a beating, letting Luthor just wail on him, all the while waiting for the gravity gun to work its magic. Lex drags Supes out of the station, causing a little more destruction and meeting up with Nostalgia, who wants to put the Daily Planet staff to death. Unfortunately for our dear despot in the making, Uncle Lexi's coming to a realization.
I can see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And those must be atoms. Einstein couldn't connect the gravitational force to the other three. But if he could have seen this, it's so obvious.
Uncle Lex?
The fundamental forces are yoked by consciousness. Everything's connected. Every one.
He just figured out how everything works.
Gravity warps time. Superman trapped me in a relativistic conundrum.
The gravity gun has sped up the time frame for the serum, burning out his power in mere hours. And Superman has swiped the spare serum vial, showing Lex that he's beaten.
I could have made everyone see! If it wasn't for you, I could have saved the world!
If it had mattered to you, Luthor, you could have saved the world years ago.
You're right.
The clock is running out now. Superman has to fix the sun before it cooks the Earth. So, it's time to say goodbye.
I love you, Lois Lane. Until the end of time.
A couple weeks later, Lois is still holding out hope that Superman will return. Kind of like that one movie. What was it called? Right, Crash. Meanwhile, Lex is meeting with Dr. Quintum while he's in jail. He gives Quintum a map of Superman's genes, how to replicate it, and how to make a new Superman. One more thing, though. I want to talk about the riddle of the Ultra Sphinx. It's clearly being used as a metaphor for the relationship of Superman as an unstoppable force for good, and Lex an immovable object, unchanging in his mindset. In the comic, at the climax of their final confrontation, Superman knocks out Lex, Luthor not changing in any way, and Quintum instead getting the formula from Superman himself. The movie, however, changes this. Superman doesn't deck his foe, instead letting him wallow. Think about what he saw with his all-too-brief super senses, and ultimately become a better man in his final days, after the disappearance of Superman, and helping to build a new Man of Tomorrow. I like the change. I'm not sure if I prefer it to the comic, but I do like the idea that Superman was able to reach Lex, at least. And despite being a clear departure from the source material, it does play into something writer Grant Morrison said in an interview. They claimed,
I love the idea of Luthor getting superpowers, and just as he's about to take over the world, he starts to see the world the way Superman sees it. And to do that to someone as intelligent as him, where suddenly it all comes together. But the tragedy of Luthor, the irony of it all, is that he figures it all out at the exact moment Superman reverses, turns the tables and knocks him out. So his enemy beats him in the end, always, you know, and it's so tragic because you could have left him for another 5 minutes and maybe Luthor would have saved the world.
So, while different, it is in line with the original writer's own thoughts. The comic is a fantastic love letter to Superman and his history, excelling in marrying Silver Age silliness with more modern tastes. I say more modern, this comic came out 18 years ago at the time of recording. The movie does cut a good bit of the Silver Agey stuff out, the Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen homage of issue 4, and all the Bizarro stuff, for instance. But it still shines through with the Lois Lane stuff homaging the general vibe of her stories, though updated for the 2000s, and Lex's scheme feels like one he'd have tried, taken to the extreme, even if there would have been some silly way out for Superman, like it being a Superman robot, or he was faking it to trick Luthor. What the film cuts of the celebration of Superman's past, though, it does instead have a closer focus on the fact that he is dying, and how little time he has left. Though, cutting out almost the entire middle portion of the comic does kind of fuck the film's pacing. The voice cast is also mostly pretty damn good. Christina Hendrick does a great Lois Lane. Anthony LaPaglia is the voice I hear in my head for Lex Luthor. Sorry, Clancy Brown. Ed Asner's a perfect Perry White. Matt Goobler's a pretty charming Jimmy Olsen. Honestly, the only weak link is, unfortunately, James Denton as Superman. I don't know, I just don't think he captures the sort of lighthearted but straightforward charm of Morrison's Superman. I wouldn't call him flat, he just feels a little generic. I can't help but wonder what it would have been like if they'd gotten George Newbern or Tim Daly to do it. But he's far from the worst, or even my least favorite Superman. Other than that, there's another thing I don't particularly care for. Editor Justin here. I couldn't actually find the line in the movie I was looking for. It might not actually have made it into the adaptation, so I'm just going to talk about it anyway, because I already recorded that part, and I don't want to cut it out. Also, I'm going back on what I said. I think James Denton is pretty flat as Superman. Like, he has an emotion in, like, 3 or 4 scenes, and nowhere else. Like, he's very boring as Superman.
History's greatest monster!
Double editor Justin. I figured I should actually articulate what it is that I couldn't find. It's this line in the comic where Lois asks, "Why her?" And Superman's only response is, "Well, I guess there has to be one thing I just can't help." It's in the book too, and I don't care for it there either. The reason's incredibly obvious. She's not some tethered humanity. In every way but literally, he's already human. He wouldn't turn evil if she died. No, she grounds him. Her cynicism grounds his idyllic optimism, making him a bit more realistic in the way he sees the world. And likewise, his inherent hopeful outlook and optimistic attitude helps to make her a bit more hopeful and kind. They level each other out. But the film's biggest problem is exactly what you probably think it is. It simply doesn't have enough time to do the whole thing. At a runtime of 76 minutes, they couldn't fully adapt the scope of all 12 issues, and at that, I'm not certain that they used the time they had as best they could. Despite being one of the better parts of the movie, I think adapting issue 9 was a mistake. The Baudel and Lilo stuff is cool, but I think that if you have to truncate the story to fit an hour 16, the movie would be better served adapting the other parts of the comic instead. I'd suggest issue 10, the issue with the famous scene I referred to earlier. It would give a decent variety of scenes, that included, where Superman could provide several different feats, fights a giant robot, let Dr. Quintum show up more than twice, and shows how he prepares himself for the end that approaches closer and closer. I'm also disappointed that they didn't have time to adapt issue 6, but I do think the scene they included in its place was a fairly worthy substitute, even if Clark neglects to tell his mom that he's dying. All in all, though, I think the best course of action would have been to make it a two-parter, like the later adaptations of The Dark Knight Returns and The Death and Return of Superman. That way, they wouldn't need to skip almost half the book, wouldn't have to compromise for runtime, and they could have resold it later as one whole movie, like they did both examples. With all that said, my beautiful audience, that's all for this one. This would have been out quicker, but I scrapped the video I was writing before this. Just couldn't get into it. Oh, by the way, hope you like the redesign here. If this video has in any way made you interested in All-Star Superman, I implore you to check out the comic before the movie. Still check out the movie, but as good as the film is, the book is immeasurably better. Anyway, if you want to follow me elsewhere, my Twitter and Instagram are down in the description. Remember to leave a like if you like this one, comment, maybe even subscribe and hit the bell. I hope to catch you on the next one. See you next time.
Come on, kids. If you want to grow up fast, take one of these. One puff and they'll soon be in my grasp.
Not so fast, nicotine. If you want to go up fast, take one of these. With my X-ray vision, I can see the harm cigarettes do inside people's bodies. That's why I never say yes to a cigarette.